This case takes place in Switzerland in February 2024. Meet Christina Jimovich. She was born on the 5th of April 1985. It said that her upbringing was relatively stable and that she had a passion for sport. Family and friends described her as beautiful inside and out. In 2003, at the age of 80, she won a regional beauty title, and in 2007, she won one of the 16th final for Miss Switzerland. She didn't win, but for her, it was a great achievement. In this whole experience, she learned a lot about beauty. So that same year, she founded a business called the Catwalk Coach. She taught models, pageant contestants, and businesswomen how to walk on a runway and how to move in high heels. Over the next decade and a half, she became one of the most well-known catwalk coaches in the whole of Switzerland. She even mentored contestants inside the Miss Switzerland organization. In 2017, she married a Swiss businessman named Mark Raven, and the couple went on to have two daughters, one born in 2020 and another born in 2021. Her family was her entire world. By the start of 2024, she was 38 years old, living with her young family and in a semi-detached house in the town that she had been born in. In mid-January of 2024, there were some photographs of a winter breaks posted with her husband. Everything looked just right. However, those would be the last photographs that she ever posted. By 2024, her husband Marcus was 41 years old. Very little is documented about his childhood hobbies or interests, which would give us an insight into who he was. His public self-image was consistent and rather unremarkable. He was an entrepreneur, a husband, and a proud father of two girls. Outside work, he volunteered with a scout group, and acquaintances and neighbors described him as the ideal husband in a perfect family. But there was a little more to him. It turns out that in 2016, he was reported to have been repeatedly violent in past relationships. In fact, he had once driven his car over the foot of his ex-girlfriend. His ex-roommate also said that during arguments, he would hit her, punish her against the wall, and strangle her. No conviction had ever followed, and he had no criminal records. Christian's friend said that she had been in love with Mark from the very beginning, falling head over heels. But one long-time friend had been surprised that she got into the relationship at all. She said that he didn't suit her at all. She claimed that Marcus was arrogant, critical, and almost too introverted. And perhaps this friend was right, because the marriage did begin to decline after the children were born. It said that the two stopped getting on and they drifted apart. Christian and Mark tried couple counseling for a time, but then Mark refused to continue. By the sound of it, Mark wasn't too easy to live with. He became controlling of the children. Friends witnesses a further decline in the relationship in 2022. Mark later agreed that this was the year that things got worse for the couple, but he said that his wife's behavior had changed. He claimed that she had begun making audio recordings of their conversations, but this was for good reason. Christian began feeling more and more unsafe around him, and sure enough, he was violent with her too. The first dated record of violence in the marriage was a police emergency report from the 14th of July 2023. Marcus assaulted Christina, and there were photographs taken at that time. They showed how Mark had left marks around her neck after choking her. About a month after the police report in August of 2023, Christina recorded a conversation in which she told Mark that she wanted to separate. She framed it around the children. By the summer of 2023, her decision to leave was settled. She wanted to separate, but she also wanted to stay home with the youngest daughter until the child was old enough for kindergarten. And to do that, she would need financial support from Mark. Mark, on the other hand, opposed the divorce. He demanded permanent custody of both daughters, and he refused to provide any financial support. In his own words, he said he was afraid of losing the children, the house, and the business he founded. It was Tuesday, the 30th of February, 2024, the day before Valentine's. The two daughters were at a daycare. Only Christina and her husband were in the house. That morning, another argument erupted, and it ended up with Christina being hit in the face. She drove him out of the house soon after and said that he had to leave now for good. Later that morning, they both agreed to discuss the term of their separation once and for all. This was scheduled for midday. Christina had good intention going into this talk. She wanted to be fair, but also stern. She wanted to split and she wanted the kids. Marcus, on the other hand, knew what Christina wanted and decided then and there that he wasn't going to let her split with him or take the kids. When he arrived at the house, he had one thing on his mind. Whether or not the two talked is unclear, but what is clear is that he began an assault with a punch in the face, followed by more, and he didn't stop there. This time, he pulled her hair hard enough to tear some of it out. He then grabbed Christina by the throat and forced her up against the wall. He choked her there with his bare hands until she lost consciousness. Then, while she was out cold, he searched for something to wrap around her neck. He found something which is described as a band-shaped leather. Some sources claimed it was a ribbon, and others say it was something like string. Regardless, he wrapped something around her neck, strangling her until he knew that she would never wake up again. By this point, it was about 1 in the afternoon. It was an hour assault, so she did not die quickly. He then carried her body down to the basement laundry room, and what he did down there makes this case a truly shocking one. Over the course of 3 hours, he dismembered her body. He did so using ordinary household and grand implements. For example, he used garden shears, knives, and jigsaw, which is a powerful tool normally used for cutting wood. After reducing her body to more manageable sized pieces, he went even further. He used an industrial blender. He placed her body parts into this blender to liquefy her as much as he could. He then attempted to dispose of what was left by mixing the liquid with roughly 10 liters of disinfectant chemicals like bleach. The sheer brutality and the degree of discretion is chilling. Mark had also done something else. He deliberately removed one of her organs. He removed her uterus. He then put the remains into the black sack and left them in the laundry room. He forgot one thing. The kids were at school and daycare, and the daycare had already called Christina's parents that afternoon because no one had come to collect the girls when they were supposed to. And so Christina's parents actually had to pick up both of the daughters and they took them straight to Marcus' home. Mark answered the door like nothing happened. In fact, he decided to replace the favor of collecting the children by making Christina's parents dinner. They came inside and sat down at the dinner table, unaware that the liquefied remains of their daughter were just downstairs. He spoke to them throughout the night like nothing had happened before putting his children to bed. All the while, Christina was downstairs, semi-pured in black bags. Christina's father stuck around while Mark put the children into bed, but he thought that something was off. While Mark was distracted, the suspicious father searched the cellar and entered the laundry room. And down there, he found a black bean bag. Inside the black bean bag, he found his daughter's head with the hair still attached. The father ran out of the house screaming until a passerby alerted the police. The police received the call shortly after 8 that evening. Officers reached the house within minutes. On the night of 30th of February, Mark was arrested inside the house in the presence of his parents-in-law. After entering the basement and hearing what Christina's father had to say, they officially reported that the victim was a 38-year-old Swiss woman, Marcus' own wife. The children were placed in emergency care immediately. A post-mortem was then conducted on Christina's remains. During this process, it became clear that Christina had died and had then been brutally dismembered. There were ligature marks and fractures around her neck, consistent with sustained strangulation and numerous blunt force injuries inflicted while she was still alive. Among the injuries they were found were that hug clumps of Christina's hair had been pulled from her head, suggesting that her final moment must have been unbelievably terrifying. At first, Mark claimed to the police that he had merely found his wife dead. As you can imagine, The police did not believe him. On the 15th of February, Mark was brought before the courts for a pre-trial hearing, where he was placed in jail pending the criminal trial. It was after this that he went on to claim that he acted in self-defense, essentially changing his story. He made several appeals to be released on bail, but all of those appeals failed during this time. The investigation continued. On the 22nd of July 2024, a former partner described a pattern of violence in the relationship lasting until 2016. As we mentioned before, also the audio recordings Christina had made were found, and the narrative was that Christina wanted to separate, and clearly Mark didn't want her to leave. Mark was then assessed by two criminal psychologists who determined that he was fully responsible for his action. He had narcissistic traits and obsessive compulsive future, but he had no disorder which would diminish responsibility. However, the defense obtained a private opinion from another senior forensic psychiatrist to challenge this conclusion. For a while, this question of whether he was criminally responsible became central to the case. Additional digital evidence took months to recover, in part because Mark had refused to surrender his password, but the investigator eventually got them. According to this evidence, he had searched human anatomy and other methods of disposing a human body. It was evident that he had played videos on his phone during the dismemberment, which is a wild thought. On the 10th December of 2025, the public prosecutor office closed the investigation and filed indictment, aggravated murder, and disturbing the peace of the dead. They carry the maximum of life imprisonment, and soon enough the trial would begin. The trial opened on the 4th of May 2026. It was scheduled for 5.5 days, but it lasted longer. The public was excluded owing to the nature of the material. Only accredited journalists were admitted, and even the most of them following the hearing were by video link from an adjacent room. This case was heard by a 5-judge chambers. The prosecutors opened by calling this case one of the cruelest and the most harrowing in Swiss history. The prosecution case rested on the forensic evidence, found the absence of defensive injuries on Marcus and his post-offense conduct, such as changing his story. As proof of planning and premeditation, pointed to the industrial blender that he had bought without an apparent use, along with the volume of chemicals that he had on the hand. The prosecution argued that clearly deliberated and that he had planned to dispose of her body way in advance. The prosecution claimed that he was driven by egotistical motives such as the loss of his self-image and the financial consequences of the separation. On the other side, the defense claimed that the killing was in self-defense. Mark testified that the conversation had begun positively before his wife supposedly attacked him with a knife. Following this, he killed her, and that the dismemberment that followed was a panic reaction. He read this as a statement, and he said he had caused his family miserable suffering and that what he had done was absolutely unforgivable. Mark claimed that he took full responsibility. He also said that not a day passed that he did not despair and asked why he failed to prevent this tragedy. He offered the bereaved family 100 francs as a gesture of remorse. The family's lawyer called this offer tactical. The defensive closing argument ran for nearly 4 hours. They invoked the principle of debate and asked the court whether it could rule out a self-defense escalation with 100% certainty. The defense asked for a full acquittal on the murder count, conceding only to the discretion charge. The most difficult moment of the trial came from the victim's side. The elder daughter's words were relayed through the lawyer. She said that she was sad because her mother was dead and that her father had lied to her. A statement also read to the court from the mother of Christina. She said that she is a mother who lost her daughter, whose children missed their mommy every single day, who had been brutally torn from life just 1 month after she tried to forge a new path for her children and herself. No verdict, she said, could bring her daughter back, but it could show that on the 30th of May 2026, one of the judges delivered the judgment. The chamber found Mark guilty on both counts. When the verdict was ready, Christina's father, who had found her remains, cried openly in the court. Marcus' parents arose from the public bench, walked toward Mark and embarrassed him before he was laid away. For now, Mark remains in security detention. As for those two children whose lives have been turned upside down, they were put into the care of Christina's parents and they are working towards permanent custody. However, this is a competing application reported from the side of Mark's family. They too want custody of the children. The case Christina is vile. For the father to find her in such way is just beyond horrific. It is terrifying to think that Mark invited the parents to eat inside just moments after blending their daughter in the laundry room.